Hi, first off, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Hoerl. I've been in Germany for about 14 years now. Just to understand kind of where I'm coming from with football, my experience. What I find interesting about my situation is I played high school. I'm American. I played high school in America. I played a couple years of semi-pro football over there, and then moved over here when I was 23 years old. So I didn't have high-level college experience or anything like that. And what I find interesting is when I came here, my knowledge was similar to many European football players, and it was through the many years and the many clubs and the many different coaches, some very good coaches, that I picked up certain things about football that have really helped. And I think it's relatable to European players, especially what I'm going to be talking about here, because it's actually a football learned from European standards, if you want to say it that way. It's not coming from a giant, complex, college, detailed, 1,000-page playbook background. It's coming from simplified German, European experience and ways of learning it. So I think it's interesting for a lot of coaches that are maybe beginning out or in lower leagues, or even higher coaches. It's interesting just to hear it from that perspective, American that's been learning it over here. I learned this defense from the creator of it, Joe Roman, at my time at Marburg. It was very interesting for me to hear how he talked about this in detail, and it made me realize that football isn't about complicated schemes, but it's about detailed technique. Yeah, you can put the biggest scheme in the world in, but if you don't have players that can move or do it right, you're not going to be able to have success with it. That's why I kind of made a little saying here. You don't need a big scheme to have a dominant team. It's kind of a rhyme. Makes maybe a T-shirt I can make. I don't know. But it goes true. We did this defense in Marburg. We had some other ones there, and I've used it, of course, in our team, 6th league. At 6th league, but we had 40-plus turnovers through it, and it was just really dominant. So I just find it interesting. It's not something that you're going to want to just have that one defense for your organization. It's always good to have different kind of things, different kind of defenses involved, because you never know what you're going to see. Goal line, for example, different kind of coverages. Cover one, I'm not going to talk about cover one or cover two man or anything like that. I'm just going to go over the general cover three that I teach and that we've been doing for a few years now. This first, and I gave everybody a handout of this presentation. This is just basic understanding of the zones that we've all seen 1,000 times in our life before. But I'm going to go into detail on how we cover in these zones and how you could technically cover everything that comes from this. Yeah, and that has to do a lot with the technique that is being taught by the kids, or by the coaches to the kids, or to the adults, depending on what you're teaching. There's a lot of information here that you guys can see in the handout. Maybe if you zoom in, you can see it. But just basic general rules and assignments of everybody, what they have in order to do their job. And you see there's some detail with it, and I'm going to get into that. Linebackers especially are very detailed in this scheme, which I'm going to spend a good chunk of time explaining exactly how linebackers cover in this in order to make this work. Otherwise, a cover three can be beaten by a lot of different things. These are the formations we have. As you see, it's very basic. It's just a simple stack. Tackles are head up on the guard. That way you can go left, you can go right. They don't really see. You don't want to set somebody in a gap, because ideally, if somebody is in the gap, they're shooting that gap. And if they're not, it's going to be a long way for them to get somewhere else. So it's going to be a little complicated. So it leaves a little bit of not trickery, but making the offensive line have to figure out what you're going to do. They can't, if you're in the gap, they'll know right away, all right, he's coming here. Do I down block, or am I going to the linebacker? And this way, there's a little open for that. Based on the different formations, it shifts and tightens up, but it doesn't really change that much. We have, there's a laser pointer too, look at that. So, for example, when we have a slot receiver, our outside linebacker is outside shoulder of him. For the reason being, we want to be able to, if he's going to come block, he's got to come out to us, which makes that open and has a chance for him to come down. A very important technique from the linebackers is aggressiveness. And I'll get into that as well a little bit. But you have to have players that read properly. You have to know what they're reading, and they have to be able to attack at the right times. It can't be a guess. Otherwise, everything kind of falls apart. Just let me know if I'm talking too fast, too, for anybody. Let's see. 2 running backs, same thing. I mean, what I want to point out, and I'm going to go into it a little more, it's a cover 3. So what's important to identify right off the bat, and that's, I think, something that confuses a lot of people, is if you have defensive backs and you'll see, a situation like this, where it is, like this with 4 receivers, oh, that'll be to cover 3 every time. Yeah, it could, but I'll talk in a second about how it's harder. You can make it more difficult. But important situation is in every alignment or every formation that you see that the defensive backs are identifying the deep threat. Yeah? If we have a cover 3 going on and we have a 2 running back, any 2 running back situation, if you notice right here, 1, 2, 3, there are only 3 real deep threats, and therefore there shouldn't be too much confusion about it. Regardless of what these 2 guys do, however they cross, there's still only 3 real receivers that can go deep on the field. So therefore we should be able to cover all of them. Yes, a running back can come out of the backfield, but to have him get out of the backfield, get all the way up the field, he's without being touched by a linebacker, which I'm going to talk a lot about rerouting as well. If that's done right, he's not going anywhere. Yeah, so you're still only going to have your 3 deep threats. Basic fronts are real simple. Like I said, tackles are lined up, head up. This is just a basic, you can call overs and unders and pinch and whatever you want. I mean, I just put basic ones out there to keep it simple, just to identify how they're filling the gaps. If we call it, I just called base because it's B gap, arrow because it's A gap. Easy signals that you can point that the team will then understand what's happening. And just based on what's happening, where the defensive line is moving to, the linebackers are going to know their gaps. And of course, responsibility is very important, that they understand what they're doing at all times. So this is all real simple and basic. So I'm going to start with the defensive backs before I get into the meat, when I get to the linebackers. Like I said, it's important for the defensive backs right off the bat to identify what their deep threats are. I've seen enough times that they'll stand back there when the ball is snapped, panic, and not know who's coming where. You'll have a free safety in a situation with, if we have 2 running back, he won't know where to go. He'll look over here. He really doesn't need to do that. Yeah, there's really no reason that the free safety needs to be looking at one of the far right receiver when there's only 3 possible receivers. In a situation where you have 4 receivers, I'm going to talk about a call in a second that is a way to help them identify that. However, just to get into the basics of it, we have a football field. It's 53.33333 yards wide. I have to admit, I thought it was 50. I had to look that up. It's interesting. I don't know if they changed that at some point, but okay. So if we were to take that 53 and divide it by 3 defenders, yeah, what are you going to have? You're going to have 18 times 3. Each defensive back is going to have 18 yards left and right all the way back that he's going to have to deal with. What we do, and what I've been doing this year, is I have the cornerbacks line up, head up, 7 to 10 yards, depending on what league you're in, how fast they are, how fast the receivers are. Line up straight ahead of them. I have them stand in a 45-degree angle, essentially staring at the quarterback. They can see the receiver, they can see the quarterback. The problem that you have with a lot of teams is the outside contain. So if a cornerback does not come down hard enough and get the outside edge, technically that whole sideline is open, and there's usually some big runs happening. So what I have them do is at that 45 degree, at the snap of the ball, everybody is looking at the running back. Yeah, I don't care what league you're in. I've been in all of them, and I've seen running backs can be lazy. Even the best import, if he's not getting the ball and it's a pass, he's going to stamp off to the side. You're going to see immediately, unless they're play action or doing a draw, you're going to see immediately what kind of play it is, and that's the most important. There's a lot of talk about where players are looking to identify pass and run. Look at the guard, look at the triangle, the quarterback, the receivers will tell you if the tackle goes back. I've seen enough of that and I've played enough years, and what helped me the most is just looking at the running back. And that's what I tell the players, out of 50, 60 plays a game, what percentage is play action, what percentage is draw? They're very minimal compared to what is actually, what is a pass, what looks like a pass is a pass. The running back's arms are open, we're reading run, yeah, and we're attacking that run. If it happens to be a play action situation, you have to understand the offense is set up in a run formation, so they're going to have one less receiver out there. So even if they do have two running backs setting up a play action, if I got two running backs, what did I say? We got three receivers. We got three deep guys. They're not attacking. They're going to attack, but they're not coming down like it's a blitz in any way. So if they're going to see arms open, they're going to come forward. They're going to see that it's not a pass, not a run, play action, and they're going to get back. So I have them standing in 45 degrees. When they read run, they're taking one step outside and coming hard down, yeah? They're 7 to 10 yards back, so they're going to take a little bit. They're still reading the whole time. They're going to see a fake handoff in time, and they're going to see a receiver coming. That's why I tend to start them at 10 yards, because I want them coming forward aggressively. They can always stop and go back, because what is a defensive back supposed to be good at? Forward and back, yeah? They're supposed to be your fastest guys on the field. Which gets me to my other point of my little cloud drawing here, if you see it that way. If it's a pass, the same exact thing happens. Instead of stepping outside the receiver and coming down, they're going to step inside and drop straight back, essentially putting themselves in the center of their 18 yards, okay? So regardless of what happens, wherever these guys run, even if you have 4 streaks, yeah? Worst case scenario in a cover 3, oh, that'll beat it every time. If he's standing here, there's 9 yards to the sideline, 9 yards to the next guy's 9 yards. You see it breaks down like that. In fact, technically it's 54 yards, so it's 8.8 something, whatever, very, very small. These are supposed to be the fastest guys on your team. So you would think if somebody's sending 3 to 4 receivers deep, that pass is going to take a little bit. It's going to take at least 2 seconds, maybe, we're talking a deep pass. It's going to take a while to get down there. If these guys cannot run 9 yards in 3 seconds, you should look for new defensive backs. It can be beaten. There's different scenarios that can come, but again, this is not a defense that you should only have. You should have other options. You should have cover 2, cover 4, whatever you need based on your opponents. But this is just a general way of technically covering everything that could come. So this is enough space. Receivers, and let's take 4 streaks, for example. Let's say he goes and he just runs along the sideline. Same thing. Even in that scenario, these guys running the hashes, they're not taught to attack the receiver, and that's a problem you have with cover 3 a lot. You have, or any coverage for that matter, you have defensive backs, especially cornerbacks when they're in a deep coverage, tunnel vision staring at that receiver in front of them. So what you have to do is break that. There's a difference between man coverage and different kind of coverages. So if they can beat their paradigms, that's a problem that you see a lot of people having movements that they've done over the years and they don't want to change them. But you have to break sometimes their thought process behind that they get to their point. If he's running up the field, he's only going to be 3 to 4 yards away from him and still be able to technically be able to cover anything in here. So that's why I'm calling it a cloud, because they're not necessarily, they're just going back and covering an area. They're splitting this field up into three areas to be able to cover everything. What's important about this is the linebacker technique, which I'm going to get to in a second here, because that's going to make this pass take a little more time. What let's talk about, for example, the four streaks situation, yeah, scenario. Let's say they all go up the field, or let's say we have, besser gesagt, let's say we have four receivers. It's rare that a team is actually going to send four deep. Yeah, you're going to have that out to scare people and look like something, maybe pull some attention away, hand the ball off. But with four receivers, what's important to understand is if these guys understand that their area is a zone and they're not reacting to the receiver, what I put in is I talk to the cornerbacks and I give them what I call a short call. It's very simple. If we have four receivers and he's backpedaling, of course he's going to see if it's pass. He's going to still be able to see his receiver in front of him. If he runs anything less than 10 yards, yeah, he's going to see him 10 yards and go in, 5, any kind of slant, he's yelling short. Yeah, he's yelling short loud enough that the free safety can hear it. If the free safety hears a short call, yeah, and I know it's hard to hear calls sometimes, but that's something you have to practice. Pass is a call that happens for linebackers, outs and ins. If he calls short, free safety doesn't have to necessarily even look over here because he realizes this receiver is not a deep threat, and this isn't a four receiver set, keep in mind. He's slanted in and he's covering this route anyway. So if he's doing a short route, I only have three possible deep threats now, and now it's already cover three deep threats, perfect. The problem is going to come from the free safety. If we have four receivers and the free safety sees two possible receivers, that's where you're going to have a big problem. Which one is he taking? Who is he reacting on? And therefore, the short call comes in handy because it helps him understand which direction he's going to move. The drills that we do with the cornerbacks, like I said, the 45 degree, it's very simple. You say hike, ball's up, they move inside, drop back, ball down, run, they come forward and work on blocking and shedding the block from the receiver. Free safety has to be able to move his body without turning his shoulders, and that's a technique that we all probably understand. Backpedaling, having them move around, keeping their head moving, identifying what route is, which middle receiver is going deep. If he hears that short call, he doesn't have to go there, so he's just focusing on that next receiver, who of course he's watching. If that next receiver is not doing a deep route, then you have this kind of wild card situation where that's where your athlete's going to be. He's going to be coming out and helping underneath deeper corner routes, something like that, where he can help, he can move in. But generally, the cornerbacks are going to be then deep. What I tell the free safety in the beginning, I'm using this a lot, is just pick one of the number two receivers. Yeah? He's got enough time to be able to react. Don't focus on looking at both of them and losing his feet, not backpedaling properly. Look at the quarterback's eyes. He's going to turn his head in a direction. Pick that number two and read what he's doing. If that number two stays short, he's immediately using that technique, shuffling over the other direction, focusing on the other number two receiver, and there we already have it covered. It's important that these defensive backs stay over the top of these receivers. Otherwise, touchdowns happen. Yeah. So this comes to the. No, so we're done with the PowerPoint now. Let's come to the linebacker part. I have to draw some of these drills up here. So the linebacker coverage that I teach is something that I myself learned. I started off doing the typical drop back 45 degrees and play Torwart, hoping that I'm fast enough to cover an area 20 yards wide. Even the best goalies in the world can't cover that. And enough times happen that I drop to my zone, staring at the quarterback, and have a guy run right behind me and catch the ball next to me, and then have to chase after him. And it just frustrates you because then that's when teams start breaking down. Yeah, you're supposed to have that, you're supposed to have that, and then somebody's yelling, and all of a sudden you're fighting amongst yourselves. And I know we've probably all seen that before. So what we do is an underneath coverage as linebackers, and this is kind of the whole bread and butter of this defense. And it's very important that you have linebackers that are at practice that you can teach this to. So basically what it comes down to is, we'll just take a drill like this. If we got a receiver, right? Can you see that? Our linebackers, go back to the alignment page. So we have 4 linebackers and 4 possible receivers, right? Here we are. Strong safety is not necessarily covered. He's covering the flats, but it's kind of a man in zone coverage. Outside linebackers are attacking the hip of number 1. Inside linebackers are attacking the hip of number 2. Right off the bat, the first step for every linebacker is stare at the running back, see what's happening. Am I seeing a run or am I seeing a pass? If we see run, there's nothing else. It's smash that gap as hard as you can. No questioning, no thinking about it. I've learned through the years the difference between experienced players and inexperienced players are ones that trust their eyes. There's a lot of players that'll see something, it'll be everything they think, but because they're inexperienced, they're going to do it slowly. And if you see a run but think it might be pass, and you start backpedaling slow, staring the wrong direction, the run comes and they're going to get a big gain on you, or that lineman is going to come out and he's going to meet you. So what we have is, first, the reading important. Second, when they read a pass, and these are the drills we run, I started off with 5-yard in routes. Yeah. If the receiver's running a 5-yard in, let's pretend it's number 1 or number 2. Number 1 or number 2, it doesn't really matter. I'll have the centers here, and we'll have our line. Our linebacker is going to be at 4 yards right here. So what's happening when he sees pass, his eyes are at the quarterback until that ball goes up, until he gets his sign that the quarterback's hands are up, or that running back right off the bat steps off looking for a block. Yeah? As soon as he sees that, he's turning his hips, firing off in a direction, using momentum. I talk about momentum all the time, attacking this receiver's hips. Yeah? The idea is that at all times, if this is the quarterback's eye, yeah? This is his line of sight. At all times, that linebacker needs to be in between the quarterback and that receiver. If a quarterback cannot see a receiver, especially within 5 or 10 yards, he's not going to throw him the ball. And if he does, he's going to have to really get it over his head. So the drills that I run is I have them attack these routes that they ideally... There's a eraser here. Ooh. I'll make it a little closer. So we got our linebacker here. We have our receiver. He's at 4 yards. Let's say he's running a 5-yard in. Yeah? The goal behind this, eyes at the quarterback, read pass. Soon as he reads pass, his eyes leave the quarterback completely and get directly to the receiver's hips. The goal is not to meet him at some point. Yeah? The goal is to be, once he gets here, this linebacker's route is going to look like this, running at him. By the time he gets here, he's right underneath his hip. Reroute contact. We're allowed within 5 yards to make contact. Identify at this point what route he's running. So any receiver, he can go out, he can go up, he can do anything he wants. He can turn around, he run a 5-yard in. 5-yard in, we make contact. Hit the receiver, turn with him. As soon as we identify what the receiver is doing, 5 yards, 3 yards, 5 yards, 7 yards, 10 yards. That's usually when routes actually show themselves. Yeah, we don't know what's happening in the first few steps. If he's past 3, we have to wait until 5. At 5, he's going to do something most likely. Yeah, if he goes deep, we are simply underneath him on his hip as he's running up. Ideally, the whole way, hands on him as close as we can, head back to the quarterback. We saw the route, we identified it, we turn with him, go up the field. On a 5-yard in, same exact thing. When the receiver makes his cut and runs this way, we are right here with the eyes on the quarterback, waiting for that pass. Normally that pass isn't going to come. Let's take a situation where, let's take that scary all streaks situation, yeah? Linebacker, receiver. Let's say he just runs up the field. We got a free safety over here. We got a cornerback over here. Now the same applies for different receivers. So this is after they've moved. Yeah? So let's put number 1 here. We got our outside linebacker. Same exact scenario. Let's just take this one. This guy, same exact thing. Let's say they all do streaks. We read the pass, we read the play, we see it's pass, we attack the hip. At this point, these receivers are on the hips right underneath him. Inside linebackers, same exact thing. Inside linebackers stop at 15 yards. Outside linebackers stop at 10. Yeah? At that point, the cornerback should take over. If every single receiver has somebody at 15, however far it is, yeah, we make contact here, follow them up, over the top, free safety reads this, let's assume There's a short route on this side. Free safety's over the top, yeah? Every single receiver technically will have somebody over the top and underneath. And this is where this cloud idea can work, is if the linebackers attack the routes properly and get on the hip, the only way that quarterback can throw that football to him is by putting at least another second of air underneath it. And if you give that free safety, the fastest guys in your team, one more second of air, he's going to be able to react and come down and take that ball away or make a very big hit. But it's those really fast passes on a seam or a go route that get at about 10 to 15 yards that are dangerous that he's not going to have time to get to. And if he's just dropping back with his eyes staring at the quarterback, he's not going to get there either. So it's very important that these drills that we run teach these linebackers not to run up here where it looks like the receiver's going, because it's at that point that the receiver's going to cut in and he's going to have to turn around, and now there's vision between the quarterback and he's going to catch that football. So I want to go through the 4 different drills that our linebackers run. So we have the 5-yard, I'm just doing like this. We have the 5-yard in. We have the seam. And then you have, so this one, this is 1, this is 2. We have the 5-yard out with a post. Crossing route, 3. And we have 5-yard out with a seam, okay, 4. This is what I practice every single day with the linebackers that get it burned in their brains. This one we went through already. Linebacker is going to start here. Same thing here, linebacker. Oh, I got this one too. Linebacker, linebacker. Same, so the first one we talked about, attack the hip, turn with, receivers covered. Yeah, ball's not thrown. Seam route, attack the hip, identify the route at 5, turn, run with. Both covered, yeah, right on the hip. So now we have our crossing routes. This is probably the most dangerous route I think defenses see, and offenses love to run this one. And it's very easy to beat if you have a linebacker simply dropping back and reacting off of what this number 2 receiver is doing. Ideally, what offense wants is that linebacker bites on this out route, and you got this open right up here. And that's where they're going to throw the ball a lot. So what we talk about is this is, of course, in tandem with the outside linebacker. So if we're going to have the outside linebacker here and the inside linebacker here, seeing as they're both doing similar technique, outside linebacker is technically only getting out and coming back underneath with his eyes then watching for the out routes. So scenario, linebacker sees pass, opens to number 2, identifies right away at about this point that number 2 receiver is going out. As soon as that happens, he has to yell out. It's of course important that we communicate on the football field, and that his eyes immediately go to who he is assuming already is going to become the new number 2 receiver, right? Number 2, number 1. If they cross, it's at this point right here that this guy is now number 2 and this receiver is now number 1. Outside linebacker is simply dropping back, waiting with his eyes for this pass route. But he has to sit back here in order to stop, because here's your window in your cover 3. This is where your hole is going to be. If he sits back there long enough and is trained to come down hard on that out, the faster he is, the better. And you need a powerful, fast, accelerating guy to play outside linebacker, the fastest you may have. At this point, when he sees number 2, the inside linebacker, he immediately gets his eyes to the hip of the new number 2, who was the number 1, changes his direction and attacks the hip. He doesn't know yet what this number 2 is doing. He doesn't know yet what number 1 is doing when he becomes number 2. Because in this same scenario, that number 1 receiver can still just go up the field. And if he goes up the field, he doesn't become number 2. He still stays number 1. Technically, he's not even in the calculation anymore. So in this scenario, let's just take in that he's running a post. He can also do a banger route, you know. Watches number 2, realizes, calls out, adjusts to number 1. If that route keeps going, simply, it's important that he gets depth here, changes his route, and just simply mirrors that post as close as he can to him underneath. In this situation, because he's touching the receiver, he's going to call man. He's going to do a man turn on him. If at any point when we're rerouting a receiver, we can touch them, we turn with him, yeah? If I have my hands on him or my arm on him, I'm not pushing him necessarily, I can still cover him. It goes for basketball too if I just play that. If I got my hand on him, I know where he is. In this case scenario, I can't touch him, so I'm going to have to do a zone turn. Where he turns this way in this one, he's going to have to turn this way. The reason being, if you look at a circle and he's looking this way, how many degrees is this versus this one, yeah? Talking, yeah? We can turn 100 degrees to see the quarterback and see the pass to the out route, which we attack. Or we do a whole huge man turn all the way around. The ball goes behind us. Our eyes go like this. We don't see that pass. We don't see the quarterback running. And our eyes, now we come back. Now we're chasing around. It's a whole lot more steps. So it's 100 versus 260-degree turn. So it's important to teach these guys in these drills. This is your man turn drill. This is your man turn drill. This is your zone turn drill. And what do we do in this one? I'm going to draw this one specifically. Let's take our number 1 seam and number 2 out, right? We all learn in football, if somebody leaves a zone, somebody's coming into a zone. So who could possibly be coming into this zone, the curl or the hook, if 2 goes out and 1 goes straight? The receiver on the other side of the field, and those killer crosser routes that nobody's really planning for. So in the 4th drill that we run, it's the exact same thing. Attack the hip. See he's out, call out, attack number 1 until we notice at 7 to 10 yards that he's still going. Even if he were to hitch, that's the outside linebacker's role because he's going to be over here. He's going to run, he's going to turn, he's waiting here to come down. When this inside linebacker sees that number 1 is going deep, he immediately plants his foot in the ground, does a zone turn, and comes straight back to the middle of the field, assuming that there is a crossing route coming. Maybe there isn't one, but even in that case, you could have a draw, you could have a quarterback running, you could have a screen route, but it's important that he doesn't just stop and turn and go, well, I don't know, you know, so that they come back down hard and that he is ready to pick that ball out, because this is that big Ray Lewis play that everybody sees, you know, that he comes down and really hammers that guy. So these are the 4 drills that we run. And technically, these 4 drills are going to cover any route that you put out there. I mean, anything that happens, it's not teaching a linebacker a zone to cover, it's teaching him to cover a man in a zone. And if you do that, it forces the idea of rerouting, and rerouting slows every play up, which is ideally what you want to have. In this situation, if you have that crosser coming and you have your other side linebacker make contact and reroute that number 1 receiver or that number 2 receiver, he'll never get to the middle of the field to have that cross route even caught. So therefore, the quarterback's going to take off running. So you're going to have a situation where every single linebacker is flying out and dropping, right? So you're going to say, well, the middle of the field's wide open. What if the quarterback just takes off running? That brings us to the defensive line. I'll try to hurry up here. So let's just take our scenario. Let's take a running quarterback. Let's say he says, these linebackers are awesome. I can't throw a single pass. I'm just going to wait for them to clear out, and I'm going to run the ball. So we teach, ideally, depending on how fast your linebackers are and how athletic your defensive line is, it's going to depend on which you're actually calling. Base should work, yeah? Because what we want is we want the quarterback to think he can run through the middle. We want the quarterback to think, oh, I'll just take off. Look at these linebackers. Look at that big hole in the middle of the field. So if we call base, now that means our linebackers have to have the A gap, so they can't line up too far outside. I usually give them a yard or so depending on how fast they are and how fast they can change directions. But they can't line up out here to get that number 2 because they're slow. Yeah? If you have that situation, you're going to have to call arrow or weak or something depending on where the ball is on the field. But ideally, if they're fast enough and that linebacker's here and we call base, what we teach the defensive line, and we have a technique for that they play B, they're not shooting the gap, they're shooting that outside shoulder, trying to get that defensive line to turn and run with them, ideally trying to push him out. But when they see that there's a pass, and our D-line is taught to make contact and extend, that they have separation, that they can read the play. They're not just rushing with their heads in the offensive lineman and hoping that they're going to get a sack somehow. They're getting separation, seeing. As soon as they see, or even notice, because defensive line has different technique, that this is a pass coming, they immediately, and the drill that we do is if the quarterback's here and I make contact with that offensive lineman and I see a pass, what we'll do is we'll put a towel on the ground and we just simply have them, it's a really huge rip where they go all the way down, grab that towel off the ground just to over-exaggerate that kind of movement so that as soon as they see pass, they don't wait and see that the quarterback is about to throw it or he's holding the ball back, but as soon as they see this isn't a run, these guys are not blocking like a run, they do this technique and come right back around that both of them are in the middle of the field, in the A gap, which makes that quarterback's going to take off running and get a nice sandwich right in the center, and therefore he's going to learn not to do that anymore. And then at that point, that offense is going to start to break down. Like I said, our team last year, we didn't have that fast a linebacker, so I had to call weak a lot, ideally because strong side of the field is essentially more field side. This linebacker, seeing that he has B gap, can line up out here and get to that number 2 receiver because he couldn't do it normally. This is a short side of the field, so that Will still lines up in the middle, has A gap, but he can still get to number 2, or there isn't any number 2 because it's mostly 2 running backs. Defensive ends, it's real basic. It's just what I like to do is a 2-point stance, a very heavy leaning forward 2-point stance with the outside foot forward, that they just immediately getting long extension into that offensive tackle, that their outside foot is still back in case he does try to seal. They can always change their direction and get back outside. So it's very basic when it comes to that. People can do 3-point stance, but it all depends on how big your defensive ends are and how long their arms are. If they don't have that long arms, they're not going to be able to do that. Let me just do something real quick. I want to show trips. Because I'm sure people are saying we'll just run trips and you'll beat that. So here's trips. Yeah, let's do it with whatever. Let's do it with just 3 receivers, no tight end. All right. So all that happens. Your outside linebacker is always reacting to number 2. He's always going to be outside shoulder that number 2. So you got your outside linebacker here, still reacting to number 1. Your inside linebackers, which originally were here, all they're doing is shifting over, yeah? In a trip situation, you're going to call weak because you're going to have this linebacker shift to the middle. He's got A gap. You don't have another receiver. We're not talking about empty, by the way. We're talking about just trips, yeah? 4 receivers, one side on trips. But in the end, it looks like this. He shifts over. You got a linebacker here. He shifts over because he's got B gap. You got a linebacker here. Same exact thing happens. Whatever route these guys are running, these guys are attacking the hip. He's looking at number 3, he's looking at number 2, he's looking at number 1. That's it. Same exact technique, same exact scenario. Yeah, good. I'm just about done then. So let's just take whatever you want. 1, 2, 3. He becomes then 2, he's number 1. Same thing I talked about before. Everything is covered, everything's underneath. You have your receivers over here, your defensive backs over here over the top, your cornerback is here. Look at this. So yeah, how many deep threats, if that even is a deep threat? We have 1, 2, at best 3 deep threats. Cover 3, it's covered. Linebackers underneath the hip. Number 3 is going to be here, number 2 is going to be back here, and number 1 is waiting for this only open pass to get caught that he comes down and lights out. Just one thing left I want to say really fast. Some of the drills that we run, what I find is important that a lot of football players don't have the coordination needed. You tell them to move, you tell them to change direction, zone turn, man turn. You know, they get tired, they trip over their own feet. One of the drills that I like to do, besides those before practice, is I like to put them in scenarios where their brains have to think. So just one tip that I would say, if anybody doesn't do this at practice, maybe you could add it. Step over bags, yeah, that I have them go through 1 foot each bag, 2 foot each bag, and then 3 foot each bag. And what ends up happening, and you'll see, and I think that's a good way to coach players because they all think they're the best players in the world. If you make them do 3 feet, you're going to see them start tripping over their own feet. And the second they start falling over their own feet, you don't have to tell them you're doing it wrong. They're going to see themselves. They're not that coordinated. Keep running drills like that. Keep running drills that when they're tired, they have to pick numbers, 4-cone, that their brains start kind of farting on them. That there's no oxygen. They start realizing, I'm making mistakes. I need to get smarter. I need to get more coordinated. You're going to have players that coach themselves after a while. And then you don't have to constantly yell at them or scream, because escalation is a very important process. But yeah, that's all my time. Any questions? Guess not. Yeah?
You fall forward, the outside linebackers, are they going to reroute the slot receivers?
No. That's the thing. Number ones, never look at number 2. The outside linebacker is not looking at number 2. As soon as he sees pass, he's going to number 1. Because the problem you have is he's going to stay on number 2. If he does, that inside linebacker is going to see that and think, well, who do I got? And he'll stop in his tracks. So outside linebackers are only attacking the number 1 receiver. Inside linebackers are only attacking number 2. Yeah?
As far as the secondary goes, I know you said that they're about 7 to 10 yards back, and then they're reading their running backs. So not even the safety's taking any type of read steps, like a typical 3-step back pedal.
No, because if it's a run, he's 13 yards back. And that free safety, who's the one guy that's not blocked on the field, or the least amount of block? That free safety. He needs to be a monster. Free safety, God, I wish I was just a little bit lighter, that I could play that spot and just come down. And just imagine every run, you're just standing back there 10 yards away, and nobody's blocking you. And you just see a running back fighting through the middle. Oh, beautiful. If he backs up, they're going to see pass rate. They're going to think it's pass. That's 3 more yards gain. You got to see it that way. And poor technique, because they don't do the coordination. They're going to take 3 or 4 steps to change directions. He's gained 5 more yards on you instead of technically a 1-yard loss. If that free safety can read that play, sees a running back's arms open up in a 2 running back set, in a scouted game where you know they're running the ball, he's going to come down and just 1-yard gain or a fumble or something like that. That's why free safeties can't be just like the weak kids on the team. That's got to be the animal. Outside linebackers, fast and tough, best tacklers. Free safety, fast animal, yeah? He doesn't need to be able to tackle well if he's coming down that hard. Any other questions? I guess not. And then thank you. Das war's.